Hey guys, hope everyone is doing great today. It's been a while since I have gone live, so I wanted to share a couple things today. And I had an hour this morning that I didn't have any appointments. So, uh, what I'm about to share is not pretty, but it's truth, and it is our job, I think, as Christians, to stand up and rise up and start speaking the truth. And so I'm going to share with you two cases that actually happened in Horry County. And the reason why I'm sharing them is, one, I need you to understand the corruption that we're dealing with in our country. This is not just politics. This is complete corruption from the very beginning. And one was a case back in 1928, and then another case was in 1991. And so I'm going to share with you a newspaper clipping, and kind of how I went on this journey. For those of you that don't know, about a year ago today, not today, but a year ago in January, I started going through some massive spiritual warfare, and I didn't understand it. And as I went through this warfare, I found some people that were much smarter than me on a spiritual level, and they started explaining to me what was happening. See, I had stuff in my bloodline called generational curses, and all of us do. Our ancestors have done things in the past that have affected us and will continue to affect us if we don't cut those curses off of our bloodline. So that's ultimately what this is about, is how do we fix the problems that we're facing today? Because it's not normal to die an early death. It's not normal to live with sickness and disease. It's not normal to have alcoholism or drug abuse, drug addiction in your family. Okay, so you need to understand that. That is not normal. That is a curse, and that is something that you can cut off of your bloodline. You can disconnect that today. So, and there's the powers that be do not want us to know that information. God clearly wants us to know it, but we're so ignorant and we are so busy, engulfed in everything else in the world, that we're not focused on what actually can change our life and save our life, that we just go through life thinking that, well, maybe one day I'll get better. Maybe one day I won't have this addiction. If you're suffering from things and that you can't figure it out, and it's just over and over and over again, I promise you, and I urge you to go through and release the curses that are in your bloodlines. And if you don't believe that there's curses, go read your Bible, because it says that there are certain curses that will last 4 generations, which is getting involved in your family and ancestors, getting involved in Freemasonry, idolatry. If you get involved if you have illegitimate children, that's 10 generations. So there are certain things that can last forever, and we have to know that. The reason why we have to know that, guess what, is because it affects us. It affects our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren forever. So I'm going to share with you 2 murder cases that are very near and dear to me, because one of them was done by my grandfather, and I did not know that, and it was kept a secret from from me. I don't know about the rest of my family, because one of my cousins told me about it, or gave me enough information for me to go look the information up. And guys, I just want to tell you that my family, because of what happened in this, and I'm going to read it to you because I think we all need to know truth. And this child was buried in an unmarked grave for almost 100 years. And it's time to bring that truth to light. And I've been wanting to share this for about 3 or 4 weeks now, but I didn't see a time to share it where it was a good time. So today is that day. Anyway, my father's father, his name was A.C. West, or maybe sometimes he went by Asa West. I was told by a cousin right after the funeral of my mother that our grandfather killed a child. And so I'm like, what are you talking about? How? Well, I mean, who was she? Well, no one knows. No one will talk about it. So I called my father and I said, who did Grandpa Asa kill? And he said, he didn't kill anybody. Well, he went to prison, or he went to jail. I didn't know either one at the time. No, he didn't. And my father hung up on me. And I called him back and I said, why won't you tell me the truth? Why won't you tell me the truth about what happened in my history? It was 100 years ago. Why would it matter that I know now? Because it very much matters. It very much affects my entire life. And I'll tell you, the reason why I can tell you it affects me is because the women in our family tend to get beat up by their spouses, including me, including I know my brother's wives were all beat. I know that numerous family members were molested by their fathers. It's a curse, and we have to cut it off. But you can't cut off a curse that you don't know you have. So I'm going to read to you what happened to this little girl. See, I went, well, let me just step back. I called Horry County, and I said, look, I know that there was a child that died, and I don't know her name. I know that my grandfather supposedly killed her. And so they searched. They said, what year is it? I don't know. Maybe it started in 1920 and work your way up to 1981, I think is when he died. And it turns out they found it from 1928, but it was just the assault, a high and aggravated assault charge, and that he did go to jail, and it said her name was Edith Ward, and Edith was 9 years old, and she was beaten with a sewing machine belt. But it said nothing about her death. And so I continued to go search for her, and there was nothing here in Greenville County. I looked up on newspapers, I went to the library, tried to find microfilm, nothing from Horry County, which kind of shocked me. How in the world does Horry County not have any paperwork, any newspapers that are recorded in the rest of like newspapers.com? Why don't they have that? Why is it not reported? So I called Horry County Library, and I said, please, if you can find anything, this is around the time that he went to jail, whatever you can find. And I found 3 documents. And I want to read one to you. Well, let me just step back from there. I'd kind of given up when I couldn't find anything on newspapers, but I found this little girl's name. I found in Greenwood, South Carolina, there was a paper that actually said that the Governor Richards was sending investigators down to Horry County to investigate the beating to death, the brutal beating to death of a child, a foster child, by her foster father, Edith Ward. And I said, what? Why would my grandfather have a foster child? One, he had 15 children of his own, one of which I think he raped, and she had a child. So as I continue down this journey, I called Horry County. They gave me this paperwork, and I'll read it to you right now. It says it's on July the 12th of 1928. This was hidden from us for almost 100 years now. Is accused of child's death. Edith Ward, a child waif, dies at Conway Hospital. Man charged with death. A story of inhumane, brutal treatment of an infant. Now, I want you to understand this. When I read this to you, I need you to understand that Horry County, no one from Horry County, no police officer ever attempted to try him for murder. Never. Only the family members were the ones that went and filed charges against him for high and aggravated assault. So I'm going to share it with you now. On Tuesday, July 3rd, little Edith Ward, 9-year-old waif, died at the Conway Hospital after an illness of some duration, suffering from rheumatic fever and from the effects of a much severe beating. Just making it bigger so I can read it. Which was administered by Asa West, or AC West, same thing. The man with whom the child had been placed some time ago at a home. Dr. H.L. Scarborough had been called to attend the child, and he found upon examination that its back had been reduced to a state described as raw beef. There were crisscrosses of whelps and bruises where there had been used on the child what is described now as a sewing machine belt. Evidently wielded with great force, too, because these bruises in the course of a few days turned into deep sores and contusions. The child died several days after being taken to the hospital, and during the several days that it suffered, most of the time in a partly unconscious state and in delirium, It raved and said but little except these words spoken over and over again: "Daddy, don't whip me." In the opinion of the doctor and nurses, the child had been severely whipped after it had become ill from the effects of the disease which would have been it had been afflicted. The whipping, no doubt, took place before the child had become so weak that it could not stand. Sentiment was strong against the man with whom the child had gone to live some time ago, and it was said that the child moved around from place to place after being cast adrift by its so-called parents, and it was in the hands of a family that intended to keep it. But this man West paid to the other the sum of $5, which would have been around $400 at that point, which expense that the other had in regard to the child, and after that the child stayed with West until it was moved away from its place to the hospital. The child, known as Edith Ward, is said to have been one of a number of children mixed up the Fernie Ward and Mary Baker family. Mary Baker is said to be its mother, and its reputed father was Fernie Ward, and Ward and Baker woman were in trouble in the courts on several charges of violation of the prohibition laws and for various moral violations. They were tried in the court here some time ago and received sentences. The story of their wrongdoings have already been told. The story of the child was enough to bring tears to the eyes of any man or woman having any sense or feeling for humanity at all. The stories going about telling of the inhumane treatment given to the little girl by West may be true in their entirety, or they may be partly true and partly false. It is a tale that tells of what conditions may be in a community where law and order and human conduct may be counted on as being up to the average in kindness. Always, though, the exceptions to the rule, this case of Edith Ward being an exception. According to the stories now being told, she was made to work in the fields planted by West, and she was unable to perform the work that he set for her to do, and she did the best that she could at it. That best was not effective. Her strength was not equal to the performance of the task. Small of body and of weak construction to begin with, the girl plodded on and at the behest of her driver, and gave up on the instance of the blows, which cut into her back and made the awful signs which were found by the doctor when he took off the child's clothes to give her treatment. At the time of her death, the joints of her arms and legs were swelled to twice or three times their normal size. The wounds in the back were not among the least of her troubles. The article does not pretend to talk about all of the beatings and the mistreatment laid at the door of West in connection with the death of Edith West. The coroner was called upon to hold an inquest, and he made arrangements to that end last Friday. The man accused had not then been arrested. Now, I want to share with you, and I'm not going to read all of it, but the case was, they never did anything. Actually, a coroner, and I'll just read just a little bit. In the case's questions of holding an inquest had not come up and had been considered or the matter reported to him in any official way until after the child had died at the hospital and its body had been removed, or body had been buried. So that child's body was buried in an unmarked grave. The death certificate, they lied on the death certificate and said that she died of rheumatic fever. So the doctor at the hospital signed and said that she died of rheumatic fever. They immediately went and buried her in an unmarked grave at Cedar Grove Baptist Church in Conway, South Carolina. And there she has laid since July the 3rd of 1928. Almost 100 years. And so I reached out to Cedar Grove Baptist Church, and I had found this little girl. And it took weeks and weeks, and they finally found where they think her body is, because it's been 100 years. And so I'm going to get a tombstone. I'm going to buy a tombstone for this little girl, and I'm going to let people know on that tombstone what happened to her. That she was bought and brutally murdered by A.C. West. And It's just sickening. It's sickening to know what can happen in a town when you have enough pull. And I don't care if it was 100 years ago, it was murder. It was brutal murder. And her parents went to jail for prohibition, yet nothing was done to her for murder. And for those of you that ask, she was white. I thought, I didn't know what she was. I just can't fathom people selling a child, period. But obviously that's why I'm so heavily involved in child sex trafficking. I just didn't know why. And stopping that and feeding children and providing nourishment for children. And guys, this is serious stuff. Like, nothing was done in Horry County. And I want to share with you another murder case. And the reason why I'm sharing with you is so important is because this kid is finally coming up. He's not a kid anymore. Miss Judy, I'll be happy to give you the nonprofits, so the nonprofits that we give to, but I think this is something that I have to do on my own, is provide this up. Thank you. And I guess it hit so hard because my little girl's died. I just can't believe somebody could do this, and especially someone who's kin to me, and how it could be covered up for all these years. I just don't even know. I found the census report and found that he was a prisoner. I mean, you can't make it up. This is real stuff. It really did happen. Truth will come to light, period. So I need to share with you something. I found this Friday night. I woke up about 6 months ago out of a deep sleep and immediately just said, and God has been speaking to me a lot. So I need you to understand this a lot. And telling me things and asking me questions and helping me get my memory back. I lost a lot of my memories. Apparently there was a lot of really, really bad things that happened to me in my childhood that I just let go of. And so that I could function on a daily basis. And so Friday night I was looking for a birth certificate for my son, and I came across some paperwork. It was a marriage license for my grandmother who married this man, Asa West. He was 25. It said she was 18, but I knew she wasn't 18 when she got married. She was actually 14. And so it's her marriage license. So they lied about that, right? I mean, lie about everything else. Might as well lie about a marriage license. And then she was 14, he was 25. And then it had her last will and testament. And it had birth dates of every one of her children when they were all born. And she was actually pregnant at the time that this happened. And she had a baby in December of 1928. I think it was her first child. My daddy's brother. And so, anyway, there was a murder case 29 years ago. Or actually, excuse me, it was longer than that. It was 1991 that happened in Horry County. And for those of you that may not know the details, it was considered to be the most gruesome case ever. Well, that's the one we knew about information. Like Pee Wee Gaskin's gruesome case, killed 140 people in South Carolina. You know, we have the Bigums that the last of the Bigum, he killed 5 of his family members to cover up a murder that he committed because somebody was going to tell on him. So there was a case done in 1991. It was a gruesome case. And as I'm researching and have been researching Freemasonry, to those of you that don't know that, I have heavily been studying that. And because my family members were heavily involved in Freemasonry, my mother's father was a 33rd degree Mason. My great grandfather, 33rd degree Mason. Great grandfather, 33rd degree Mason. I had to go through renunciation prayers of Masonry, and because my family opened that door to let Satan in, and not only to themselves but also to my bloodline, and that is one of those generational curses that last at least 4 generations, and it stops with me. It stopped with me. So I had to go through these prayers, and as I went through these prayers, some of the curses, if you tell the truth about Freemasonry and what is done there, then one of the curses in the very first degree, you do what's called a penal code, and it says that they will cut you from ear to ear, take your tongue, throw it into the ocean, and watch the tide go over it twice a day. That's the first degree. Okay, so if you have family members who are involved in Freemasonry, that's the first degree. The third degree, they bring themselves back from the dead. I mean, not like actually bring themselves back from the dead, but they inhibit it as if they have rebirthed. So they wrap you as a mummy, throw you on the floor, then someone picks you back up in reverence of you being brought back from the dead. And so they don't have the same God that we do. Let's just say that. They worship a totally different God called the great architect of the universe, okay? And there are things that they do in these rituals, and some of them don't know what they're doing, but they do them anyway, and there's curses that go along with it, not only for themselves, but for their family. But one of the rituals, you literally say that if I tell the truth, that I will be cut from ear to ear with my tongue taken out. Okay, there's another one of the sayings that they do, and I believe it's in the 4th or the 5th degree. I'd have to go back and look. I was trying to look that up this morning. 5th, I think it's in the 5th. But that they cut you open, and your stomach open, and they allow your innards to be exposed, and the beast to eat you. Okay? Why am I telling you this? It's very important for this case that I'm about to share with you. And I found this paperwork of my grandparents, and I had no clue I had it. I've had it for at least 25 years. I don't know who wrote it, but I will tell you that my parents took me to the murder trial every day, and I remember many, many details that were spoken in this murder trial. I was only 10. Yes, I understand that, but I also do have a photographic memory. So I just want to start reading it to you. And it says, Ken Register, tried and convicted of a crime he didn't commit. Now, this kid is up for parole. He's not a kid anymore. He's 46 or 47 years old. He's up for parole next month for the first time ever on February the 9th. And he did not commit this crime. I knew he didn't commit this crime 29 years ago when we were in court. But I need you to understand these details, and the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because of the corruption. I need you to understand how many people it takes to be involved in the corruption, and especially the corruption that's happening in our country. This is the exact same thing. This was the first ever DNA case in the state of South Carolina. So I'll get started. On Saturday, November 16th, 1991, Ken and Angela were seen at a local go-kart track by many people. And I was at that go-kart track, and I saw Ken and Angela that night, including a church group that didn't arrive at the track until approximately 11:15. This go-kart track was located approximately 6 miles outside of Aner, South Carolina, and Ken and Angela went to his car around 11:37. They sat in the car for a few minutes, and then Ken left Angela and drove to his home outside of Conway. His arrival at home around 12:15 a.m. was heard and confirmed by 2 different neighbors. Now, that's from 11:37 to 12:15. He had 33 minutes. Okay, so keep that in mind, 33 minutes. That same night at 1:13 a.m., Bonnie Todd, who was Crystal Faye Todd's mother, telephoned and asked Ken if he had seen her daughter, Crystal, a 17-year-old high school senior. Register and Crystal Todd were friends and had even dated twice back in 1988. But Register had helped Bonnie Todd locate her daughter on at least one other occasion after she failed to return home. On that night, Crystal was located in the woods following a party she had attended. Register told Bonnie Todd that he had not seen Crystal but offered to check the 2 area hospitals. According to the telephone company record, Register contacted the hospitals at 1:32 a.m., called Bonnie Todd. After letting her know that Crystal was not at either hospital, Register went to bed. The next morning, on his way to church, Register saw a police car at the Todd home and stopped. The officer told Register that Crystal was still missing. At 12:43 p.m. on November 17th, Crystal's cousin, Kevin James, telephoned the Registers and told them that Crystal's body had been found on a dirt road in another part of the county. Now, I want to mind you, Kevin James, who is not on trial here, I posted a message and responded to some information that he shared yesterday. And after sharing with him that this was a Freemason satanic ritual, this is identical to it, and sharing with him that, asking him the question on why he lied, which you'll see that in a minute, why he lied on the stand, and then also asking him if he was left-handed, which that will make a big deal in just a minute, he blocked me, completely blocked me, and would not allow me to speak. So anyway, an autopsy revealed that she had been stabbed at least 31 times, had recent vaginal and rectal heterosexual intercourse, probably by 3 people, according to the notes. 3 people. SLED reports say there was no sperm in her mouth. Her throat was slashed from ear to ear. Only her spinal column kept her from being decapitated. And the killers also sliced open her stomach, revealing her intestines, which protruded from the body, and the potassium level is consistent with postmortem interval in the range of 30 hours. The blood was negative for alcohol. According to the interview, she had a couple of beers at a party that night, and according to solicitor Ralph Wilson, a SLED team was called in before the body was sent to Charleston for an autopsy. In other words, there should not have been any of the very little materials left for the pathologist to find, even though he revised his autopsy twice. The body was discovered at 10 a.m. on November 17, 1991 by 2 brothers looking for a place to deer hunt, and they said that they spotted the fresh blood in the roadway and the body in a ditch by the road. More than 100 of Crystal Todd's friends and acquaintances were interviewed by police. All of the interviews were recorded by the police except for one, Ken Register. All of the males interviewed were asked to submit samples of their saliva, blood, and pubic hair for DNA testing. All of the samples were promptly sent to SLED, except for one, Ken Register's. Register's blood was held for 16 days before being sent for testing. Another subject's DNA samples were sent just before Register's. The other subject had a history of violent sexual behavior, including a fetish for anal sex. She was sodomized. The other suspect was also seen burning bloody clothing and boots. Police obtained a search warrant and recovered some bits of the clothing and other items. Tests showed the blood to be human. Where's he? Who is he? And why isn't he in prison? On February 17th, get this, remember that date, February 17th, 1992, Horry County Police Detective Bill Knowles, who is also a Freemason, requested that a warrant be issued for the arrest of Ken Register because the DNA matched with samples taken from Crystal's body. But the DNA testing wasn't done. Remember, SLED only had Ken's blood for 18 days. According to all reports, it takes approximately 4 months to do a DNA test. Preliminary DNA testing was not completed until February 18th, which was the next day. How did Detective Knowles know that the DNA would match several days before the 17th of February? Because they had planned the arrest several days before he asked for the arrest warrant. The arrest warrant, dated February 17th and signed by Detective Knowles and Archie Lee, stated DNA wholly matches, and in every particular match that removed from Todd's body can only be from one source. Registered, then 18, was arrested at about 9 a.m. on February 18, 1992, and charged with the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Crystal Todd. Register vehemently denied all allegations and asked to see his mother several times. He didn't ask to see an attorney. He asked to see his mother. Also, the public defender sent someone around to Ken, and he was asked to leave. SLED agent David Caldwell testified that the February 18, 1992 arrest had been planned for several days. He also testified that they wanted to keep Ken isolated and for him to have no contact with anyone. He was denied permission to see or call his mother and was interrogated without success throughout the morning and early afternoon. Frustrated from their lack of progress, police finally decided to visit Register's parents, Shirley and Kenneth Register. They asked Shirley Register to write her son a note telling him to confess. Shirley Register wrote a note, but not what the police told her to write. Instead, she wrote that she loved him and knew where he was that night, what time he left the track, and what time he arrived home. Ken Register was never given the note. Meanwhile, other officers continued to interrogate the youth. Police told him that they had witnesses who had seen him with Crystal on the night she died. They also told him his family said, "The hell with him," with which both statements were not true. They also told him that if he would cooperate, they would talk with the judge and try to save his life. Bill Knowles later admitted during the trial that he had lied and used trickery in order to get the confession, and he told a national television audience on Inside Edition that not only did he lie, but said he would do it again. Finally, after 4 p.m. that day, police announced the Register had confessed. His Miranda rights were signed at 4:10 p.m. They jailed him at the J. Reuben Long Detention Center. Police said that they had signed a confession. Booking time was 4:35 p.m. Did Ken Register, after 7 hours of intense interrogation by police, calmly sign the confession? The signature on the confession is smooth and neat and obviously a calm person, and signed Johnny Kenneth Register II. The signature on the Miranda rights shows a shaking, obviously nervous person. The signature is simply Ken Register. Shirley Register said that her son never signed his full name. The two papers were signed one behind the other. The confession is a sketchy one-page report typed by police for Register to sign, and it doesn't even say he killed her. According to Professor Richard Offshee of Berkeley, California, the confession is coerced and has no truth in it. When Register was booked at 4:35 p.m., he was so shaken that he did not know his phone number, his address, his weight, or even that his uncle that lived with him for 14 years had died 17 days before his arrest. The booking sheet indicated that Register was very suicidal and requested checks be made on him every 15 minutes. But yet no doctor was called to him, and 2 days after his arrest, they were still trying to give him some medication. It seems strange, medication prescribed without a doctor. Physical evidence also supports the fact that Ken Register could not have committed this crime. Dr. James Downs, a forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy, testified that the killer was left-handed. Ken Register is right-handed. Tire impressions taken at the scene did not match Ken Register's vehicle. A bloody palm print found on the shoulder of the victim did not match Ken Register. Fingernail scrapings from under fingernails did not match Ken Register. Ken's car matched samples taken, or none of the about 100 swabs and cuttings taken from Ken's car matched samples taken from the victim. 2 loose black curly hair fibers were found in the crease between the victim's thigh and vagina. Dark brown hair was also found in her hand and around a toe of her left foot. They also found it in her hand. The hair did not match Ken Register or the victim. Ken Register's hair was blonde. It was blonder than mine. From the date of the autopsy, November 18, 1991, until just before the trial, January 13th through January 22nd, Dr. Downs estimated that the time of the death to be at about 4 a.m. on November 17th. Citing new evidence, Dr. Downs changed the time of death to between 11:30 and 2 a.m. The so-called new evidence was that Dr. Downs said he only learned just before the trial began that the body had been found in a ditch. Upon cross-examination, however, Dr. Downs admitted that he knew 14 months earlier that the body had been found in a ditch. He actually had written it on the first page of his autopsy report. Dr. Diane Levitt, an expert in DNA testifying for the defense, said there was a discrepancy regarding the results because the sizing sheet and a picture of the computer screen do not match. In other words, there was no way to know if the DNA sample removed from the body was hers or Register's. Dr. Levitt further testified that following FBI protocols, the DNA test on Ken Register actually resulted in a non-match and would exclude him as a perpetrator. Dr. Bruce Ware, a state witness, said he would exclude Register rather than include him on the DNA. And let me just add this. In the trial, they acknowledged that there was so much incest in Horry County that they could not determine the DNA because it was so cross-pollinated. I need you to understand that. There was so much incest in Horry County that they couldn't determine the DNA of a person. And I can tell you about that firsthand. We're not going to talk about that today. Between 10:45 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. on the night of the murder, a gray-haired woman was seen sitting in the victim's car in the driver's seat. A middle-aged man was with her who drove a dark blue older model sedan. A newspaper carrier was nearly run off the road near the murder scene at 4:30 a.m. on November 17th by two trucks, a white GMC and a dark Toyota or Nissan. A white truck was observed between 12:45 and 12:50 at the Conway Middle School, where the victim's car was later located. A man approached the victim's car and appeared to open the driver's door. This was between 12:45 and 12:50. We all know that Ken Register got a phone call from Miss Bonnie Faye Todd at 1:32, and he was home by 12:15. Okay, so Dr. Downs also testified. She testified, I heard this, okay, during the trial that the attack took approximately 45 minutes. This meant, according to the confession, that Ken Register had to leave Angela around 11:40 p.m., drive 13.6 miles to the Coastal Mall in Conway, drive 0.8 of a mile to Conway Middle School, drive 5.8 miles to the murder scene, have sex 2 or 3 times and stab her 31 times, and cut her stomach open, drive 17.3 miles to his home, and arrive home around 12:15 with no blood on him, his clothes, or his vehicle. Kevin James, here's his name again, testified that on November 19th, Register had his automobile washed and bought new tires. Receipts later proved that the tires were purchased and the car was washed on December the 19th, not November. Now, here's the thing that I asked the question on. Why did you lie? And Kevin James actually acknowledged that he was the one that changed out the tires because his father owned a body shop and he bought the tires from his father. So let me ask you a question. If you were committing a murder, would you go to Crystal Faye Todd's cousin and her uncle's body shop to have your tires changed? No, you would not. And Kevin James would have known exactly the date that Ken Register would have changed those tires out because he acknowledged yesterday in a message that he changed the tires out himself. Yet, the receipts later prove that it was a month later. It was December 19th, not November 19th. And Kevin James also rode in the car the day after. He rode in the car the day after, on November 17th, in this car, in Ken Register's car, and testified that there was nothing in Ken's car out of the ordinary. He testified against that. Tests on both the old and the new cars showed nothing that would implicate Register in this case. And many of these questions were not brought out during the trial. These questions and more have continued to haunt this county of more than 140,000 even after the conviction. The attorneys were trying heavily to try to get an appeal, and the appeal was turned down. He was not allowed to ever get an appeal. He filed an appeal 3 different times and was never allowed. And here's what I want you to understand. The arrest warrant used to arrest Ken was a false warrant because the DNA was not complete. They only had 1 probe as of 2/18, and the warrant stated that the DNA was complete. And here's what it said in USA Today, according to USA Today on 6/22/94. It said, for the most conclusive test results with DNA comes from 4 or 5 probes. They only had 1. And mind you, a day before, there was a warrant signed by a judge saying that the conclusive evidence was there for DNA, yet there was no DNA at that point. So, USA Today says, for the most conclusive test results from DNA comes from 4 or 5 probes of the blood's genetic makeup. Each DNA probe takes a week, and it takes 1 to 2 more weeks to analyze the test results, this giving a total of 6 to 12 weeks. Each test rules out by hundreds, then thousands, then millions. You can't do 1 or 2 probes and quit. According to the experts, the evidence from the crime scene should match up with the DNA. Without this link, you have no case. None of the crime scene evidence linked Ken to Crystal Todd, such as the fingerprints, the tire tracks, the footprints, the hair, the fingernail scrapings, the fibers, or other materials that were found on her body. The only thing that they have is a forged confession. Guys, he just turned 18. He was 17 years old when this supposedly happened. This was his best friend. He literally left his girlfriend and supposedly went and tried to murder a person and murdered someone, brutally murdered them. No. In the beginning, they thought this was a satanic ritual. They actually brought it up as a satanic ritual. When the FBI got involved, they said it had to be someone close to her. No, it didn't. No, this was a satanic ritual. This is what they do to you when you tell the truth. So there's a whole lot more to this case that I am not ready to share right now. But we have to do everything in our power to stop this corruption from happening. And it's not just, think of how many people had to be involved. See, we became the silent majority for a reason. You want to know why? Let me just tell you why. We became the silent majority in this country in 1826 when a guy by the name of Captain William Morgan was brutally murdered for exposing Freemasonry for what it was. He was actually kidnapped. He was trying to publish a book of the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry in 1826, and on 9/11/1826, they captured him and put him in jail for stealing or not returning a tie and a tee and a shirt. And then 136 Freemasons came together 100 miles wide when there was no phone, when there was no internet, when there was no fax machines. All they had was newspaper to communicate with each other and horses and buggies. And they all came together and they kidnapped a man. They burned down a publishing warehouse. They tried to steal the manuscripts of the man. They were constantly going back and forth, trying to get them in trouble, in jail for numerous stupid little charges. And the courts allowed it to happen. They were involved because they were all involved in it. They said police officers. You had, not police officers. You had physicians, farmers. There were teachers. There were pastors involved in this, and they literally had it mapped out to go from Batavia, New York, all the way to the Niagara, and they kept this man. They kidnapped him and kept him in the Fort Erie. Well, why would a group of Freemasons have access to Fort Erie? Anyway. Well, then they kidnapped him. They kept him there. Then they decided that they were going to push him out into a boat with his friends and tell him that they were going to take him to Canada so that he could meet his family. And then they put a concrete block around him and they dropped him into the Niagara River alive. That's when we became the silent majority. See, that same guy, Kevin James, yesterday, I asked him, I said, this is a satanic ritual. This was what Freemasons this is what happens when you speak the truth about Freemasonry. And he said, we've all been Freemasons since then, and this has never happened again. How do we know? There's 45 unsolved cases in Horry County right now since 1976. We didn't know what Pee Wee Gaskins was doing. He killed 140 people. My grandfather was friends with him. Why? As I start asking these questions and putting these pieces together, guys, it's time for us to wake up and realize how deep this is. Because this took police officers. This took judges. This took jurors. Knowing this information, because I do specifically remember them bringing up the whole 33-minute thing. He had 33 minutes to do all these things. It could not have possibly happened. He couldn't even drive 60 miles an hour to go 30 miles that he drove. He could not have done it. So how did he get convicted of something that he didn't do? You have SLED involved. You have the police department involved. You have the FBI involved. You have the jurors involved. You have the judge involved. And maybe you even have his lawyers involved. So guys, I ask, it's time for us to wake up. It's time to realize the corruption. It's time to clean house. It's time to wipe this corruption out. And we also need to get this Ken Register. I've apparently had this document for 25 years. I know that my mama had it somewhere, and I know I know she gave it to me. I don't know where it came from. But I know that on February the 9th, this guy is up for parole. And he did not kill this girl. He didn't. He didn't do it. He was 17 years old. He asked for his mama. Not a lawyer, his mama. And they forced him into signing it, telling him he would never see his family again, and he was going to get the death penalty if he didn't sign something. And they've kept him in prison all these times. And for the last 2 years, he hasn't even been able to see anyone because of COVID. Right? No one can even go see him. That's been 2 years. So I just ask you to think about what's happening. Think about getting involved. We have events every Tuesday night. We're meeting at my office to get together to bring this stuff to light. And guys, it's time for us to stop being the silent majority. It's time. There's too much murders. There's too many rapes. Too much stuff is going on. You know, I remember when I told DSS, or I told my guidance counselor that I was being molested, and my parents were allowing it to happen. And by my cousin, who was 55 years old, and I was 10. This is right after this. And they swept it under the rug. I told DSS, nothing ever happened. You know, and I remember my grandfather coming to me and saying, Courtney, it would be best for our family if you wouldn't talk about that anymore. Guys, this is not okay. Rape is not okay. Molestation is not okay. The only way you're going to stop it from happening is to expose it. Because what sucks is that I later found out that not only was it done to me, but it was done on numerous of my cousins. And then also my mama. I don't know about my mother, but I do know about her 3 sisters. So why would you allow someone to come in a home, a 55-year-old man, and go upstairs and rape and molest your daughter? You wouldn't. And I ask the question, why would you allow your 10-year-old child to show up to a murder trial that is this gruesome? Well, I went to the murder trial every day. Just questions. Just questions. And why would you bury a child in an unmarked grave before a coroner has a chance and the ability to go to that child and see if that child was actually murdered? And that's what she was. She was brutally murdered by my grandfather named A.C. West. So, anyway, that's what I wanted to share. I hope you guys have an amazing day. I'm trying to share the corruption. I need you to understand it. I need you to understand this is a big deal. We have to get involved now. We have to stop being the silent majority. We have to speak up. We have to tell the truth. We have to wake up. We have to pray up. We have to rise up, and we have to speak up for truth. Because otherwise, this satanic cult of people, these people who worship Satan, they are going to take over our country. And we won't have any say-so in it. And it's time for us to stop just sitting here and talking about how bad it is and how corrupt it is and being scared to get involved because of what it's going to do to ourselves and our children. But here's the thing, when you get rid of the curses, they can't hurt you anymore. See, they can come after me, but my voice is too big. I've already said, if something were to happen to me, guys, guess what? You know exactly where to go to. There's only a handful of people you should go to. And that's the way it should be. They should be scared of us, not us of them. So if you know information, share it, speak it, give it to me. I'll be happy to share it. But we've got to bring this truth to light. We have got to stop allowing the satanic rituals. We have got to stop allowing them to have access to our children. And meanwhile, let me share with you some other truth while I got 45 of you on here. 1918. A worldwide vaccination campaign came into play. And that is what killed 50 million people. Not the Spanish flu. It was actually an H1N1 virus from an experimental vaccine that was done in Fort Riley, Kansas, to 600 military people. And then they injected all 6 million people who were drafted into the military. And then that is what spread H1N1, which looks like the Spanish flu. And it murdered 50 million people. Every person who got vaccinated. Every person who got vaccinated. Let me say it one more time. Every person who was vaccinated from 1918 to 1920 died. And then on top of that, let me just step back. Who created vaccines? A Grand Master Freemason by the name of Dr. Edward Jenner. Go look that up on freemasonrytoday.org. See, you got to know the truth, because history tends to repeat itself. And all this truth is hidden from us. And it's time for us to share the truth. It's trying to bring this to light. If my family had stood up, the things that happened to me would not have happened. But they were not willing to do that. They worship Satan. Okay? And I need you to understand that not everybody worships the same God that you do. Okay? So they have a God. Their God is Satan. And then we have a God. That is God the Father. They're two totally different things. But when you're saying God, you're saying you don't know whether the person beside you is worshiping your God, the Christian God, or Satan, their God. Because, see, Baal has the same name. God, Master, G-A-O-T-U, which is the great architect of the universe. That's what the Freemasons call it. You got to understand this stuff. Wake up. It's important. Why do I talk about Freemasonry? Because it is a satanic sex cult. It is a secret society that is used by the elite. They are the minions of the elite. They cause and they steal children. They steal their vulnerability. They rape them. They molest them. There's massive incest that's going on. And you may say, well, why are they doing that? Go back and read the definition of eugenics. They want to keep it in their bloodline. You may say, well, what bloodline? Cain's bloodline. There's two. There's Cain and there's Seth. You may say, well, no. Cain's bloodline was wiped out. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't, because Tubal Cain was the last Jubal, Jabal, and Tubal Cain, and Naamaya, I guess is how you say her name, who married Noah. Those were the brothers and sisters. And Jabal, and Tubal Cain are the ones that they worship in Freemasonry. I just tracked that down last night. I thought it was pretty good. So if you go and actually look up the genealogy of Seth and Cain, you'll find at the very bottom, Tubal Cain, Jabal, and Naamaya. It's Naamaeh, I believe is how you spell it. That was Noah's wife. And because they're keeping it in the family, I've actually found research that, yes, Noah and his wife were on the ark, and Shem was theirs, but Tubal Cain and Noah's wife had Japheth and Ham. Guys, you can't make this stuff up. Go look it up. Go do your own research. We have got to know our history. We have to go backwards and know our history in order to see what's really happening. So these people are worshiping a bloodline that our God has said that that's the serpent seed. Okay? So you need to understand that. They're worshiping a bloodline that our God has said this is serpent seed. And this is their ritual. Exactly what happened to this little girl, 17 years old. Exactly what happened to her. There was, if nothing else, where are the other two people? Who else murdered her? Because she had 3 people's semen in her body. She was sodomized. She was raped. She was stabbed 31 times. I don't think that's something that a 17-year-old would even attempt to do for the most part, unless he saw it before in a satanic ritual. Okay, so just sharing this information. There's another case out there that is up for, if anybody has any information on it. That was my dear friend. I was 8. She was 7. Her name was Jennifer Vereen, and her case has come back up this year. And she was brutally killed in a hit and run. And we had the lunchbox that had the paint from the car. There's only 2 cars. A Beretta that was in that time frame. There's only 2 cars that could have killed her, right? And miraculously, they lost the lunchbox. They lost the paint. They've lost all this information, and we know who had the car. So we know who owned the car. There was only 2 people in the whole county within a 30-mile radius that had that one particular car, and one of them lived 2 miles away. So if you know anybody who's responsible for Jennifer Vrain, or you know who did it, we're asking you to come clean and share that information. If you don't feel comfortable sharing it, share it with me. Send it to me. I will find someone to track down to make sure that we get this information. But it cannot be in Horry County. There's way too much corruption in Horry County. As you can see, they tend to cover up things before exposing it because they want to make sure that their people are taken care of because it's a Freemasonry town. So, anyway, I wanted to share that, guys. I hope it helps. And I love you guys. And I just, if you are suffering from any sort of sickness and disease, chronic sickness and disease, family bloodlines of early death, if you have alcoholism or drug abuse in your system, guys, those are generational curses. And reach out to me so I can give you the prayers to say, and I'll walk you through what you need to do, and so that you can too get out of the chains of bondage. Because that's what it's all about. Until we can bring people, until we can get rid of these generational curses, you can't have your gifts. See, God wants you to have your gifts. He wants you to, everyone has, in the courts of heaven, everyone has a book of exactly what God has intended for you to do on this earth. And you have to read this book. It's by Robert Henderson, Authority in the Courts of Heaven, I believe. But anyway, because we have iniquities, generational curses, and things that have happened in our bloodline, even if we are doing everything in our power to be good and not sin, and we're following God, we're following all of the 10 Commandments, not just 9 of them. We have to follow the Sabbath, which is on Friday at sundown. See, there's another lie. Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown. That's the actual Sabbath, and you're supposed to worship God. You're supposed to keep that Sabbath. He says that. Okay, that's in the Bible. Go read it. But once we can get rid of these generational curses, then we can get the gifts that God has for us. And we all have a purpose. So we have a book that's been written specifically for us. And if you don't do it, it goes to someone else. You get the free will in this lifetime. You get the free will to operate in God's kingdom. And most people don't ever do it. Most people die before they even know what their gifts are because they've been spiritually and physically and mentally attacked by Satan and demons and spirits, and they don't even know how to bypass it. So I can help you do that. You just need to shoot me an email. I'm getting I start my master's program today on spiritual warfare and deliverance. And yes, I am an accountant, and yes, I do work 50 hours a week. But this is something that's that is my passion. This is what God put me on this earth to do. It's free up money. Yes, first and foremost. Heal people financially. That's what I do. But then we have to heal them physically, mentally, and spiritually. Well, in order to heal people physically and mentally, you have to help them understand how to get rid of these curses. And so God has a place for each and every one of us. It's not me. It's not someone else. He has a purpose for you in your life. And you can hear from God once you get rid of these curses. See, I didn't know that this murder affected me. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't know that the fact that my grandparents were involved in satanic ritual abuse, that my mother was a witch, that my grandmother was an Eastern Star. I didn't know that affected me. But now that I know, it's my requirement to share that with the rest of the world. So, I love you guys. If I can help in any way, just reach out. Talk to you later. Bye.